Well guys, welcome back. Customer came and dropped off this Bobcat 753. It's equipped with a Kubota V2203 diesel engine. And the issue with this Bobcat, this is an F Series, by the way, and 753 F Series. And the issue with this Bobcat is that there is an issue with the hydraulics, the hydraulic control function. It seems to drive fine, it'll lift fine, and then it'll tilt fine. But if you're trying to lift and tilt at the same time, she has a heart attack and it locks up. So the customer did wire in a little switch to like bypass the hand control movement, but it's not right. So we have to figure out what's going on here, and that way they can, run this machine accordingly. So I'm going to run this thing and try to get it to fault out. Yeah, so I tried to manipulate the arms up and down and she just locked up. So it's definitely not working right. So this model, Bobcat's got this smart system here for the computer. One thing I noticed is this lock valve, this faults out when the system locks up. So in a perfect state, all of these should be lit, saying I'm good to operate. And I'm not in the seat right now, so it's having a hissy fit. So let's get in this bitch. Alright, let's put the bar down. Okay. So that's happy. I'm going to unlock. So see how all the systems are up online? So I should be able to drop this thing now. And I can, that's good. And tilt. And it tilts. Okay? So I'm going to let you be right here. And I'm going to tilt and lift at the same time, and let's see if it locks up. And look, son of a bitch, it locked up right away. Yeah. So I gotta shut the fucking thing off, and then start it up again. Responding slow. These joysticks should be going. It's fast to respond. It's okay. Empty. Switch it. It should pick up right away. Lags for a second. How about this one? Up. So yeah, this thing only shuts off when, or it doesn't shut off, I should say. It goes into a valve lock fault. When you're using two at the same time. So I can try to do some research to see what that's about, but I'm wondering if we have an issue with our solenoid valve, or maybe the valve itself. Got the cab all lifted up, and we're going to dive into some of the wiring here. So you can see, we got this little bypass switch that was used for testing, and I can respect that. I will be returning the primary control solenoid back to its normal wiring condition, and then I'm going to do some testing. But I also want to check the resistance to ground and all the connections, because if I have, these things are pretty sensitive, and if I have a slight resistance, if I have like a higher resistance to ground, that's going to be a problem, and I'm going to want to correct that. It could be anything. It could be like a wire touching something. So let's do some baseline testing. Set the voltage up to DC. So when I put my negative to positive, I'm showing 12 volts. Battery's a little low. 12 volts. Battery's a little low. But the real check I want to do is what is the resistance to ground. So I put your checker Okay, we good. Let's check what the actual resistance is. And to the main block, I got 0.3, 0.4 ohms, and that's from the ground to the block. So that's my base reading here, 0.4. So now that you know what your baseline is, I want to check for resistance closer to the solenoid switch to see if I have a very high resistance. So let's take a look. 0.5, so we were seeing 0.4 at the battery, 0.5 here at the solenoid switch. So that tells me that we got a good negative loop to the solenoid here. Lots and lots of wiring repairs. Look at this. This wire's cut. Is it cut? Someone peeled some sheathing back to... They peeled the sheathing back, probably to do some testing. Okay, we'll have to tape that up. What the hell is going on here? This looks like the primary voltage supply. What the fuck? These pins okay? Yeah, look, see this positive? This positive pin is loose. What are these other ones? So the reason why I'm going through all of these electrical repairs is really just for peace of mind on my end. You know, if everything's not in like its natural manufactured state, it's hard for me to understand really, or to trust and do proper diagnostic on like my next steps, because there could be an issue and they just couldn't resolve it. So in any case, I am going through the wiring right now, and I am making sure that the proper connections, like the original OEM connections, are in, and you know, that they're done properly. Okay. Everything's in a lock state, right? Arms are down. System is activated. Cool. Traction lock override. Okay, everything seems to be happy. Look at that. So it's blinking. Spin this cap off. Oh, my hands are too big. This looks new. Cap, it looks new. Coil looks brand new. Right here is the actual, I'll call it the spool valve itself. It's like a shuttle valve. It moves in and out, and I want to spin that off. Yes, I'm going to get some hydraulic oil out of it, but I need to spin that out, and I want to see what that whole spool looks like. Let's pop this spool valve open. This will be tough. There we go. Alright, and here is our valve. So pulling the valve and looking at it, actually looks like it's in decent condition. But let's put it on the bench and check it anyway. So again, I'm using my plug set so I can properly cap off that line so I don't lose all the hydraulic oil in the world. I encourage you guys to get those hydraulic cap sets. They're a little pricey, but they keep everything nice and neat. Let's try to clean this spool valve. So I'm going to use the power probe, and I am going to test this coil in place. Let's see if we can hear it open and close. Now it says it'll take 12 volts. Of course the wind comes out of nowhere. Anyway, let's see if you can hear this click. It is. Hear that? It sounds a little choppy though. Using my favorite gum cutter. Let's spray this. These things are tight, and if there's like shit in the hydraulic oil, it'll totally clog this thing up. Get my air gun and blow this shit out. So while the air compressor is cranking up, I'm going to clean off the stem here. I just see a little bit of debris and some rust, and you want a good smooth connection here, so I'm just going to clean this up and make this look nice and shiny. Alright, now that that's nice and clean, let's just see what this sounds like at least. And positive. Let's see if it sounds any better at least. Here we go. I mean, it's definitely moving good. I feel like it's louder than it was before, which is a good sign to me. So the valve's reinstalled. Let's just see if that made any difference whatsoever. Let's start it up. And let's start her. Out, comes back on. Still not there. I will be running a diagnostic test on seeing if the voltage drops when I move the joysticks on here, to see if that's what's locking up the system. So I am going to I put my alligator clamps on, I ran them through here. I'm going to drop the cab, and then I'm going to start the machine and see if the voltage cuts out at any time when I'm manipulating the joysticks. Okay, so the moment I hit the override, it should get power. Nice. A little low. 12 volts. You know, it's probably coming from the computer, that's why. I was expecting to see a little more because the alternator, but this is a little newer, so it's got a computer, so 12 volts. So, override. Alright, let me lift it up. Ooh, look at that. Down, up, down. Delay. You see how it blinks? So I'm going to turn the handle, cuts out. Look at that. Up, cuts out. Up, cuts out. Down, cuts out. Down. That's interesting. What that test does, it tells me that we definitely have an electrical problem, not a mechanical problem. Just want to make sure I got good juice. So what I'm actually going to do is take all of the grounding connections off, clean all those, and then put everything back on. For some reason, I really think I have a ground issue, so I want to dig into that. So there are 3 grounding connections here, motor grounds, and it looks like the primary control wiring goes to this as the primary ground. So I'm going to be checking those, cleaning all those connections up, as well as the ground on the battery, and then I will test it again. I just finished cleaning all the grounds, so that's good. These are set. However, while I'm here, I'm going to clean this positive as well. I just so happened to look at the fuse blocks over here, and I was like, let me just see these, make sure they're good, and I'm touching them. This one's loose, this one's tight, that one's tight, that one's alright, that one's alright, that one's a little loose, this one is stupid loose, this one is stupid loose. And these are the primary fuse box. I don't know where the caps are, but I am going to take all these out. I'm going to clean these connections up and then try to reset the tabs. That way they're applying a lot more pressure. Because this could actually also be a problem. You know, I mean, like, look how loose this is. It's like barely holding the fuse in. So voltage is going to drop. You know, loose connection is not good. Alright, connections are cleaned and tight. Clean and tight, clean and tight. Everything is clean and tight. I went to the fuse blocks. Tight, 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 tight. Everything is tight. This one I put a new fuse in because I dropped and cracked the plastic, so shame on me. So let's, I guess let's just test that and see if that makes any difference. If not, we'll have to dig in further. Well, I let it sit overnight, fired it up, and sure enough, it gave me the same voltage issue again. Now, it's been sitting for a bit, so still gives me the fault there. Still giving me the fault there. More corrosion. So I sat down last night, I collected my thoughts to think about this thing some more, and I wrote down a bunch of things that I want to try on this Bobcat to see what the hell the issue is. You know, part of my fear is that I have a serious issue with the BIC system, which is the Bobcat ignition control system. So that's one of my fears because that's an expensive part. But I wrote down a bunch of things like checking additional grounds, looking at my relays, doing some like wiring tests. I did download the Bobcat manual, so we'll take a look, and we probably gonna have to go through some wiring diagrams. I did want to try something this morning. I woke up, had a cup of coffee, and I said, you know, let me try something. So I put my battery charger on the unit. I put my positive on the positive of the terminal. I put my negative on the motor ground. Not the negative of the battery, the motor ground. I started the thing up, worked beautifully, had no issues. So now I'm back in the land of like, okay, do I have a ground issue? So more testing to be done. Now what the fuck happened here? I'm gonna run new grounding cables from the cab, frame, into the motor, into the negative side of the battery. Looks good, huh? So I am making additional short-run connections to circle back the block and the negative of the motor and the battery. Just because Bobcat has so many wires going to these negatives, I'm a little suspicious of that. So I'm going to help support that negative loop and tie these two together. So I will button these up, install these three connections, and then I'm going to do some more testing on the unit. Alright, so I tied these two together, and then I ran an additional line to the cab here, and I also replaced the bolt and cleaned that up a little bit. The bolt actually sheared off on me the moment I took it off. So now that I've got all these tied, I am going to try to start this thing. Battery charger off, and let's see what the battery says. Let's see if I can get it to fault out now. Can't. So I got home from work, and after being successful this morning, getting this thing running, I wanted to give this a shot when I got home. Sure enough, I got home, went to turn the key. Battery voltage was a little lower than I expected it to see on that gauge. Again, I don't know if that gauge is right, but I started it up, let it run for like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, went to go use it, and sure enough, it faulted out. Another day in the life of fixing this 753. So I believe I know what the issue is, finally, I hope. And I think it is within this primary connection here. So what I noticed is this is your BIC controller wiring, following the wiring diagram on Bobcat. And this is like your primary voltage source to your operating system, and it's your primary positive control loop to your lock button up top, which allows the hydraulic valve to unlock itself. One thing I noticed is I pulled this apart, and these pins, all these pins are fucking loose. Every single one is loose. So, and I'm noticing like a lot of these wires are beat up. Like these have been like heavily corroded or, you know, chewed off with a mouse. This positive one is about to fall the fuck out. And yeah, like look at all these. These have all seen better days. Ideally you'd be replacing the wiring harness on this thing, but I mean, look how loose all these connections are. And part of me is wondering if this is loose, and like this goes together so easy, usually these should be like a little tighter. That's why they have this like cam lock here. I'm wondering if these are just barely touching in here, or if there's slight corrosion in here and there's just not enough fit. So I am debating / probably going to be cutting all these off and doing a splice spectacular. This connector was more fucked up than I thought it was. Let's start it. Okay, that's half the battle. Let's see if let's unlock it. That's good. I saw a little delay there, actually. Still, same thing. Even after fixing that harness. It's cold. Real cold. I'm sick and tired of looking at this fucking thing. This thing was a motherfucker to start. Shit I got hanging down here. Alright, let's lower the box here. Let's unlock this bitch. Let's lift it up. Oh, that's nice. I think we finally got it, guys. We finally got this fucking thing. What a pain in the dick this thing was. Do some more testing, drive it around, but kind of like at my wit's end with this thing. If this doesn't fix it, I'm done with it. So I guess the right thing for me to do is to run this thing for the next at least the next few days, just to make sure everything's good. So hopefully will be some video footage of me doing that. Just found another issue. I'm getting sick and fucking tired of this thing. I had the thing fault out again, and look what I got here. I got a really shitty positive connection here. This red and white one goes back to the computer, so I'm wondering if I'm fucking it up. So I'm gonna splice that one and then try this again. This Bobcat has me pissed off to no end, and I'm working on this thing before I go to work today. And what I'm making is a little test lead for myself. So I'm going to run a data logger on the hydraulic lock valve so I can measure the voltage at all times. I want to measure the voltage with my battery charger on it, making sure I'm above 12 volts, and then as the machine is running idling, I want to see what the voltage is at the coil. The coil the computer, the BIX controller, I spoke to Bobcat. It's hard to get someone knowledgeable, no offense, but I was talking about the logic of the BIX controller, and the moment that thing sees below like 11.85 volts, it freaks the fuck out. So we're going to run some data logs on it and see what's going on. So what I did is I just have this connector tied to the positive lead of the coil for the hydraulic lock. So what I'll do is I'll bring this into the cab. I'll leave it on voltage, and I'm going to drop the cab. We're going to test the unit with power off to the engine, just volts. Again, I have my battery charger on it, and then I'm going to run the thing and see what it does, and just see what it does. And of course this moron left the bucket up, so I gotta squeeze my fat ass through here. Fucking idiot. Fat man coming. Fat man coming. Get the fuck up. God damn it. I'm in. Alright, so it's freezing cold in here. So let's plug this in. Alright, so now let's turn the key on. Traction overlock. Okay, we got 12.1 volts. And I got the battery charger on the lowest setting. So it still drops out, which is interesting. I mean, it's holding, but we should be at 12.5 volts. Wonder why we're so low. See, it's dropping out. Well, let me see if I can get this thing to start, and maybe I can lower the bucket at least. Alright, she's running. She's not happy, but she's running. So let me hit traction overlock now. We're at 13 volts, so let's see if it drops out. And it's not dropping out. It did drop out. So I absolutely hate to give up on things, and I am no quitter. But at the same time, I need to have a balance between what is wise and financially wise as well. So I am going through the wiring schematic of this Bobcat to double check everything that I've done. I'm going to review that with you guys. I have one final thing to look at, and it's just an assumption based on what I'm hearing. And if that doesn't resolve the issue, I'm unfortunately going to have to give this back to the customer, and they may have to take it to Bobcat themselves, if Bobcat can even figure it out. So let's review with you some of the electrical drawings, and I can tell you what I've done so far. So what we're looking at here is the BIX controller wiring diagram. And the BIX controller, that is the controller in the back, we'll say the back left side, but really it's, when you're sitting in it, it's behind you on your right side. So that BIX controller has those 5 lights that tell you, hey, I have power, the traction lock's on, seat bar sensor's good, and the traction lock's ready to go. So because I'm getting the light on the tilt lift cylinder, something within the BIX controller is saying, hey, something isn't right, and I'm locking up the hydraulic valve. So my God honest thought is, man, I probably have a loose ground. You know, it's probably going to be an easy one. So let's go through some of the wiring schematics, and I can show you what I've done so far. So the first thing I did is I matched up the BIX controller as well as the wiring colors just to make sure that this was the right manual and that no hokey shit was done. And I did confirm that. So the first thing I did is I did continuity tests from these three wires all the way to the ACS controller, because I figured, okay, maybe this is getting the bad signal. But the resistance on these wires were nothing. I also shot the loop on these, sending a little signal, and it picked it up every single time. So I was like, okay, well, these three sets of wires are good. This one has a seat sensor if it's equipped. There is no seat sensor equipped, and this goes right back to the main computer, and actually doesn't play effect into this unit as well. I thought about splicing these wires to here, and I really could do that, but I really don't see a need because there is no seat sensor designed here. There is also in the BIX controller, it doesn't fault out for a seat issue. There is the bar sensor here, and that is working properly. We've tested that plenty of times, and every time we drop the bar, we get the light on saying we're good to go. So I am saying that the left side of this BIX controller is good to go. Let's go to the right side. So on the right side, we have our traction override switch. And that is the little green button that you push, and you can hear that clunk. That's the lock solenoid, and it pretty much is saying, hey, look, we're good to operate. And that is operating fine. I decided to test this anyway. I have no faults, no issues. Everything is testing good. Then we go over to this set of connectors, and you can see BLK for black, DBL dark blue. So black here, I tested the ground because I really thought there was a ground issue. I tested for continuity ground. Everything looked beautiful on this side and on the other side of the connector. Just in case I did have a ground issue, I spliced an additional ground on this side of the connector and one on this side. So this thing is grounded the fuck out. Or I should say this thing has very good grounds on it. So I have to rule out that. Then you go here to the dark blue, which is the manual brake switch. I went tested that. That does trip the computer, which trips the brake solenoid, and everything is working properly there. I also ran a continuity test and tested for resistance. Everything is working great. Awesome. So those are done. Next is this DGN, which is the dark green wire, which I thought was also a big suspect, and that is the power wire from the computer to the hydraulic lock solenoid. So I ran my little tracer on there, and it's getting 12 volts right to that coil, no problem. However, when you go to operate the unit, it drops the voltage, loses it. So the computer is saying, I'm unhappy, I'm dropping the lockout solenoid, almost like a safety issue. I tested for continuity. I found no issues within this green wire. I reran on my own custom wire. Didn't make a difference. You see here the hydraulic lock solenoid is supposed to be 8 to 10 ohms. I measured it. I'm getting 9.5 ohms. That's within spec. I also routed an additional ground in the event I had a grounding issue here. There did not make any difference. So let's move down the list, right? So then we have the brake solenoid here, so which is a red connector. And again, I tested continuity all the way from the computer down to here. I had no continuity issues. The same thing with here, my ground. I ran another custom ground here. Even though I had no continuity issues, I ran another custom ground, and the same issue came up. Then here, I was like, well, let me test the brake solenoid. Maybe something is tripping out. And then I looked at the solenoid. You can test, it has to have 10 to 11 ohms from black to red, and then 0.4 to 0.5 ohms from white to black. I tested this. I had 0.4 ohms white to black, and I had 10.4 ohms red to black, right within spec. No issues. So I said, okay, must not be an issue with the brake solenoid. Let's move on. So now we have these two wires, and I'm sorry for being lengthy here, but I'm going crazy here. So now I have this RNG, which is the orange wire, and then the pink-white wire. And then we can also follow this white wire here, because this goes back to a relay. So let's follow these three wires. Following these three wires, here we go. We have another connector. So then I tested continuity from here back to the other connector. No issues. I had full continuity. Checked to ground, beautiful, no issues. What the hell? So now I go to here, to this brake relay. I said, okay, well maybe the relay has a short or something and causing an issue. I didn't think that would pop up on the tilt lock solenoid, but you never know. I removed the relay, put a new relay in, no difference. I tested the continuity here from the relay on, no issues. I said, okay. Moved on here to the fuse. I tested this red white wire back to the starter, make sure I get good continuity, and I did, and then I rechecked the ground here, no issues. My final hope was this orange wire, so I scroll over to this orange wire, and then I notice that it goes to this fuse, and then the orange wire converts from the fuse to a red wire. I checked the continuity from fuse to this connector, no issues, no resistance. Then I measured, or minimal resistance I should say, it's like 0.1 ohms. Then I measured from red to here all the way to this power switch relay, and you see this red to red. So I tested from red all the way to my orange wire, and I had 0.1 ohms. Everything was perfect, nothing was shorted out. So, I'm not a small electronic mechanic, but I don't know how else to prove out that this BIX controller is perfect, or at least the wiring is perfect. Maybe if you plug the BIX controller into a software system, maybe there's a short somewhere on the board. I pulled the board and looked at it. It looked beautiful. I saw no issues, no moisture, nothing. No pins depressed or anything like that. So, my opinion is that the BIX controller is good and all the wiring is good. If it wasn't good, I made it good now. So, what else could be the fucking problem? So in my pissed off little rant, I've been driving to work thinking about this thing, cursing out, because one, it's taken up so much of my time, which I don't have, but I'm a sucker for problems and I like to solve problems. So as I've been testing this thing and running the thing, the only other things I can come up with is that either A, on the ACS module, that's the hand controls, either there is a short somewhere within that ACS control. However, I went through all those wires. I couldn't find any shorts, couldn't find any issues. I ohmed each of the control solenoids on the arms, and they ohmed right within spec. The one thing I did notice is after I released the traction lock, the moment I go to operate the controls, if I move fast, the tilt lock cylinder faults out. If I move slow, like I'm taking my sweet ass time, I can hear it starting to work. I can hear it work and the voltage doesn't drop out, but I can hear like a hard hissing noise, almost like I'm just not getting good flow. It's like restricted or something. And if you were paying attention, I should say, earlier in the video when I pulled the hydraulic lock stem valve out, so the hydraulic lock coil pulls that stem valve, I was thinking, you know what, I remember that thing. I didn't think it was opening up all the way. It didn't sound good. So I said, you know what, the only other thing I can think of is that hydraulic stem valve is hanging up, and when I go to operate, I'm not seeing any flow, or the ACS controller, the ACS actuator is moving so fast it's not seeing any resistance, it thinks something's fucked up. It makes sense, maybe, if the computer is that smart. I don't know if it is. I wouldn't think it is. But that's the last thing I'm going to check. So I'm going to pull that valve. I'm going to put it on the bench here. We're going to clean the fuck out of it, test it, then reinstall it in the Bobcat and see if that makes a difference. So I just pulled the solenoid valve out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to magnetize it so we can listen to it as is. So let's do that now with my power probe. And again, I'm using the power probe, so let's magnetize this. And I can hear it. It looks like it's pulling back. (6 point, 11.7, 12.1). It looks like it's working to me. but I am going to try to take this apart and clean it anyway. Nope. The only other thing I can think of, it's got to be something to do with the controllers. I am not a quitter, but I'm thinking about quitting. My next theory, which I think is my last theory, but I've said that 10 million times, is I want to check the actuators, because what I notice is when I first turn the machine on and I try to use the actuators fault out, and I get a code actuator fault from the ACS module. I know the actuators aren't bad because they move and operate, but digging into the manual, I see that there are brushes on these actuators. Kind of makes sense. It's a DC motor. So, and the other thing I notice is when I overpower the unit, so if I put the battery charger on and I'm operating this thing and I got more than normal voltage, I notice I don't get the actuator fault, but I do get a lockout that occurs on the hydraulic lock that says something's wrong. So I'm going to take this cover off and I am going to inspect the wiring and the brushes on the lift and tilt actuators, assuming I can do that. So now let's rip this whole thing apart. So now that I got the computer happy, it's throwing me a fault code saying that there is a fault with the actuators. I don't know what the likelihood of both actuators being bad is, but these things are very dirty. And one thing I noticed is that with normal battery voltage, these actuators work very slow, like they don't work too well. When I add additional voltage using my battery charger to the battery, so I'm overvolting this thing, these work really good. So looking at the manual, it says that if you have an actuator fault, you likely have dirty brushes, and you need to clean the brushes, check for wiring issues, all that stuff. So I don't know which. I think the bottom one is the tilt and the top one is the lift. I think that's how Bobcat has it. But you know, original part number is actually wiping away as I'm like touching it. Oh yeah. So I have no clue how old this thing is. The moment I touch this, yeah, look at that. The sticker just wipes away. So these are probably original, probably from like 99. And I was looking these up. You know, online, these are like $800 a pop. It's fucking stupid. So if I wanted to replace both of these, that's $1,600, not including tax. So to replace both of these, I don't know, you're looking at least $2,000 with labor, which is kind of crazy. And I know this guy wants to really push snow with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble these. Uh-oh, look at this. I got water coming out of this thing. That is not good. I'm going to disassemble this thing. I'm going to try to clean these and bring these back to health and see if that works. So I got to be delicante with these things. So first I remove the little wire guard, and I'm just inspecting to make sure that there's no rubbing or chafing. And oh, this one's got this goofy little coil here. This looks good. I don't see any breaks. And I got 3 wires going to this, and then 2 going to here. So this is your brushless motor, and this is, what is this? This must be your sensor. Oh, you know what? This is your stroke sensor. Yeah. Actually, I remember looking in the manual and there's like a belt around here. So you have your motor, your DC motor, that spins a belt, and this is there's a fancy word for the sensor, and this is actually that tells it where it is. So this is what's sending the voltage signal. So at 2 volts you should be in neutral. So right now we should be in neutral, and then when you crank it in, it's either 4 or 5 volts if you have the float, and or 0. It's one or the other. Anyway, let's take this apart further. I think the issue is probably in the lower actuator, the tilt one, because of how wet this one is. But I am going to be cleaning and doing both of these. So that's the wrong size. So I took the boot off. I recommend heating that up and then taking it off. But you see they're using a Globe motor. This is the part number. So if the motor is bad, I'm going to try just to buy this motor online instead of replacing this whole thing, because the actuator part I think is right. The actuator part is good. The sensor unit, I'll have to see if they show me how to check that in the manual, but if that's good, then we could just replace the motor here. See if this is really drawing down a lot of amps. Long little bolt. This thing is spring loaded on the end here. A little spring. Now what's interesting is there's a lot of shit around here. There's a lot of like black shit, and I wonder if that's one of the brushes that are just worn away. See if I can use my turkey poker. I bought a tractor off a lady, and I had to get it out of the lady's yard, and I needed something small, and so she gave me this turkey poker. That was like 5 or 6 years ago. I use this turkey poker all the time. Look at all the shit coming off of here. Is this grease? No, this looks like brush dust. Feels like it too. Maybe it is grease. It feels like brush dust. Just a lot of it here. So it looks like these are the 2 brushes on the motor, if I had to guess. Just a cute little bearing. I don't know, this kind of feels like brush dust to me, but it could be grease, just black ass grease, but I don't know. This is a sealed bearing, so should be no grease or dust here. Let's dig into this some more. Yeah, so you got these wires right here. They go right to your brush. It might be hard to see, but what I'm going to do is push up on the brush, and you see that? That's your brush right there. So all this shit that's in here is, I believe, brush dust, so broken down brush. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save these brushes, but what I'm going to do is pop these out and try to get in there and clean as much of this as I can. In the meantime, I am going to take a look at this Globe motor, see if I can find a replacement. If these are cheap enough online, shit, I'll just put one of these in and call it a day. But I just won't know. So, but irregardless, I've never seen brushes this dirty on something. I mean, like, literally, it's like falling apart. It's like a ton of like grease and dust. So maybe shit got in here. Maybe something was leaking. I don't think anything was leaking, but you never really know. I don't know what happened to this thing prior to me, so we're gonna do our best here. So here's the cute little armature. As you can see all this? This is like the shaft that the brushes ride on, and this is what makes connection to the motor. And this is in bad shape. Like, the brushes actually look okay, believe it or not, but this is in real bad shape. So I'm going to try to clean this up as best I can. I'm going to try to clean this up as best I can. So I ended up calling this Globe Motor Company to see if I could, one, get a replacement motor, how much it would cost, or replacement brushes. And I learned that they actually didn't make this motor. Rather, they outsourced it to this company called Thompson, which is why it says Thompson part number. Call Thompson, gave me the part number, explained the situation, and they were really not helpful. I asked them, do you have a replacement option? Well, first I asked them, can I get this? And they said, no, we don't sell those no more. And I said, was there a replacement option? They were like, no. I was like, well, are you allowed to tell me what the components are? And they were like, no. I said, well, how about this? I just need to know the brushes. Can I buy the brushes? No. And I was like, man, well, can you give me any information about the brushes? No. I said, can you just give me the dimensions? They said, no. So I said, fuck you. So what I ended up doing is taking everything apart, cleaning it liberally, and everything is in good shape. I would like to see the brushes possibly a little longer, but they're just fine. So I took everything apart, and I cleaned everything. Really, everything's in good shape except, like, the rear copper shaft of the armature that the brushes ride on was very dirty. So I had to get all that shit off. So now it's nice and pretty. Let me show you that. Yes, now you can actually see that it is an armature. Before it was just, a black ass shaft. It was really nothing. So let's put this back together. And let's put this rear spacer on. Okay, I lied. I would put these in and thread these so you get the housing where it needs to be, but I would take this off and then put the brushes on because I need to put the cap on and the brush cover on before I really put these in. You take the spring, and doing the spring will be tough, but I think I should be able just to really slip it on using my tweezers. Yeah. And the brushes are touching and they're moving with it. It's a good sign. That is a good sign. So let me put this little, I don't know what you call this. I'm going to call it like a brush dust cover. That makes sense. Appears I have it on upside down. Alright, I think we're good. I think we have a rebuilt actuator. So now that I cleaned the brushes on this actuator, the right thing to do would be to calibrate this unit here. One thing I noticed, and I made sure, was that my travel here didn't change, because remember, this is the neutral position, and at neutral position it should be at like 2 volts or whatever. So as I remove this and rotate the shaft, I made sure that this wasn't moving whatsoever, because as this spins, the shaft runs in and runs out. So I'm going to leave a link into the description for you guys to calibrate this thing in the event you need to calibrate this. Because if you spin this thing and have fun with it, it's not going to know where it is in its neutral position. So that's where you're going to have to calibrate this. I should be good, but if I do something wrong, then I will recalibrate it. But again, look in the description and you'll see a link to calibrate it. I think I finally got it. I think. Alright, let's put this down. Let's see what voltage we're at. start over, completely over. So key, we'll turn this key on. Close the lever. Unlock. Up. Down, up. So I'm going to go use the hell out of this thing and see if I can make it fault out. Good. I'm not getting any voltage drop out of it, so I think what I'm going to do is drive this thing back and let it sit for a bit and test it a couple more times. I've been working this thing pretty hard after the actuators, and she seems to be doing okay. It did have a hiccup initially when I first went to run this thing, which I was worried about, but hopefully that was just the brushes setting in place, kind of making that up. But I don't know. I mean, she's not faulty now. I'm watching this fucking VIX controller. There you go. Look, she locked out. Isn't that interesting? Can't do nothing. So now I gotta shut it down. Unlock it. Now she's happy. So this Bobcat has pissed me off to no end, and this was one hell of an educational video for me, at least, and I have become very, I'm going to say semi-proficient at these F Series models with the components and the electronics. The manual is very helpful for trying to diagnose things, and at the end of the day, I think I resolved the issue with the actuators, and I believe the actuators were the root cause of the problem here in this thing. I mean, if you go back to the video and look at what the armature looked like, it was in bad shape. Now, after cleaning that and running this thing, it runs way better than it ever did before, but it did fault out on me twice, and it faulted out on me for an actuator fault. The actuators, to replace these actuators, I looked them up, the upgraded model is $800 each. So it's going to be additional like $2,000 plus installing these things to replace those actuators. I'm at the point where I am not comfortable spending $2,000 on this thing and hoping that resolves the issue and giving it back to the customer. I'm going to call the customer, explain everything I did, and if they are unhappy and they want to replace the actuators, I'm going to leave it up to them to, cough up that money ahead of time and do that. Or they can bring it to Bobcat to see if they want to do any additional diagnostic. I did go through the computer, and I could not find an issue with the computer on this thing. And my opinion is if I had a computer issue, my issue would be there all the time. So I really think the actuators were the cause of the issues here. This thing's operating pretty darn good right now. And like I said, I ran it probably for about 2 hours, and it did fault out on me twice within those 2 hours. So I got to call it quits on this one. I can't spend any more time on it. I'm really doing this one for a favor, and I'm out of here. Till next time.